If you're thinking to yourself, I've seen him wearing that shirt before, and I've seen him in that very same chair with the very same dirty dishes in the background, you are correct. I am sitting right here in this chair creating the third film review episode right after the previous two. So whenever it actually shows up in the vlog, just know that you're actually watching a little bit of history, a time capsule. I'm probably making it way more meaningful than it is. Just run the credits and we'll review the next film. For my third film review, we are still in the category of easily my top 10 films of all time, if not my top 5. We've covered The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is the undisputed number one. I don't have to think about that. When somebody says, what is your number one top film? I don't have to... If somebody says, what are your top 5, I have to put in a little more thought. And if someone says your top 10, I have to really sit down and go, ooh, I really like all these movies. Which ones do I really push to the top? Push into that elite club of 10. But this one I think is top 5. And it is the 1988 classic by Tim Burton, Beetlejuice. What a wonderful film. Just so much fun. And to think that it was Tim Burton's second feature after Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Tim Burton grew up in Southern California, and he got a job with the Disney company doing some animation for them, but he got tired of that because their light, buoyant, family-friendly stuff just didn't fit with some of his more macabre sensibilities. If you ever have the chance to see his two short films, Vincent and Frankenweenie, you'll see more of the kind of thing he wanted to do. The early Frankenweenie before he created the feature-length animated version, which was really boring. My wife and I both. My son was in the room, and after a while he just wasn't interested, and I said, that's fine. I finished it just to say I finished it, but it just did not capture me. The short film was much more interesting, which is often the case in short films. You get these short films, I think of, and we will get back to Beetlejuice. I saw one called 9. Just 9. Big green glowing 9 in the movie poster. I saw the original short film at a local film festival. Computer animated, where these little, totally unexplained, this little burlap sack with eyes is living in this dystopian hellscape, and he's being pursued by a mechanical cat. And it's a 15 to 20 minute film where he uses his quick thinking to defeat and destroy this cat before it captures him and rips him apart. And there is no explanation. And there is no dialogue. The whole thing is basically a silent film. And then someone in Hollywood said, we like this, let's make it a feature. And as far as I'm concerned, they ruined it. They gave the little sacks dialogue and a backstory, and the more you explain the inexplicable, the less fun it becomes. It doesn't. You don't need it, especially in a fantasy. Just let it be magical. Let it be different. Anyway, okay. So Tim Burton moved on, and he eventually got his big chance with Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which was quite a success. I don't have the box office numbers, but it was a hit. It made money for Warner Brothers, and established Tim Burton as a quirky director. And he eventually, 3 years later, got his hands on Beetlejuice, which was originally going to be a very dark, R-rated horror film. But when Tim Burton looked at it, he saw the potential for it being a comedy, and it was rewritten to be a comedy, and it is to me, one of the most memorable films of the 1980s, which is a decade that is just incredibly memorable anyway. I think 1980 through 1995-ish are probably the 15 most memorable years in film history. And I believe I can honestly say that's not just because I lived through them. When I stop and think about famous films, the 1980s churns up the biggest list, bigger than the 70s, 60s, 50s. I think there were greater films. You go all the way back to Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Casablanca, It's a Wonderful Life. There's a long list of better films, but for just the most memorable films, the 80s and 90s really landed it. And I think it's because they were being imaginative. A lot of your older films were dramas. They had some sci-fi stuff and horror films. They were a little bit hampered by their technical abilities at the time. I think that's part of it is the 1980s unleashed... Well, first of all, the 1980s came out of the depressing 70s. The 1970s, everything was deconstructionist, depressing. Paul Newman dies at the end of 3 films in a row. Westerns were undergoing a deconstruction. It was suddenly taboo to have the Indians be the bad guys. There was no such thing as a good guy. There were lots of anti-heroes. That was the decade of The Mechanic with Charles Brosnan. And that I cite that one as just one example of many where everybody in it was kind of grimy, and so you were rooting for the least grimy. And so out came the 80s, and I think part of that was also fueled by the prosperity of Reagan. And I'm not going to get into an argument about how good of a president he was, because not everybody thrived under him, but enough people did that people were feeling good. And you started to get things like Back to the Future and Raiders of the Lost Ark, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Beetlejuice, Dick Tracy, Edward Scissorhands, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That's off the top of my head, but that list just keeps going and going and going. Get on Google and search for films from the 1980s, and you can just keep scrolling, going, oh yeah, that one, oh yeah, that one, yeah, that one. You don't see that anymore. The only reason we got Beetlejuice last year was because there was a Beetlejuice. Warner Brothers never would have sprung for a film so bizarre in this day and age. In this day and age, it's either Marvel or horror, or a sequel. Marvel, horror, or some sequel to an existing property. They've been taking little steps in the right direction. If came out last year, directed by John Krasinski, Imaginary Friends, If. The Wild Robot was delightful. I have seen, within the past couple of years, a few films that have been going, oh, maybe Hollywood's going to get creative again. Maybe I'm going to actually have fun going to the movies again. Maybe. Anyway, Beetlejuice. Tim Burton's second film was just a delightfully bizarre, over-the-top smorgasbord of absurd ideas thrown together, all centered around the idea that Adam and Barbara Maitland, a perfectly ordinary New England couple living a perfectly quiet life, have now died. And they are doomed to haunt the home that they lived in. But unfortunately, that home has been bought by a real estate mogul and his very, very, very yuppie wife. She does not want to be there, but because she has to be there, she's going to put her interior decorating skills to good use. And so this new family becomes the obnoxious terror in the Maitland ghosts' lives. And in an effort to try to get them out of the house, they try haunting and try scaring them themselves, and it doesn't work. They learn of a demonic ghost, a very evil ghost. He's not an actual demon, I don't think. He's just a ghost. But he has acquired powers. He has acquired afterlife magic, supernatural powers. And he has taken it upon himself to advertise himself as a bio-exorcist. So an exorcist takes a human being and expels the spirit. Bio-exorcist goes to where spirits live and expels the human beings from their lives, the living. He gets rid of the living for the dead. And they unleash him. And that is their mistake. Because although the yuppie and her husband who have moved in, they are the Dietzes. Although the Dietzes may seem like the antagonists for a while, there comes a point we realize the real antagonist is Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is the threat, and he has to be put back. He has to be destroyed, taken down, corralled again in some way. That's the basic plot. And this is a beautiful film because, like I said with Baron Munchausen and Pirates of the Caribbean 1, everybody involved seemed to care. That's a big difference for me between the sequel, B2, we'll just call it B2, and Beetlejuice. In B2, it felt like people didn't care as much. For one thing, people didn't feel as real. And the big one was Justin Theroux. In B2, Justin Theroux felt like a sitcom character who could do and say things that wouldn't work in the real world. Everybody in Beetlejuice, so this is my first talking point, depending on how much time I have. Everyone in Beetlejuice felt real. Obnoxious. Most of them, not counting the Maitlands, most of them are people I would never want to be around, which is what they were scripted to be. Catherine O'Hara as Mrs. Deeds was perfect. I had never heard of her before. I had no idea she had a career with Second City Television. I was young. I was 14 when that came out. I was not into tracking, celebrity names at that point. But she was perfect. And Jeffrey Jones as her husband was perfect. And, on the more tame, calm side of things, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis were perfect. They really made a great couple. At one time it was rumored, I haven't found the quote again, so I'm not sure, but it was rumored that Alec Baldwin said he was looking at retiring because he was tired of not getting roles where he led the film. And I have to say, Alec, okay, maybe Beetlejuice stole the show, but Alec so perfectly grounded the film. Without the Maitlands, the film would have been unwatchable. You had to have that stable center, and Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis provided it, and they did it so well. Jeffrey Jones, Catherine O'Hara, of course, Winona Ryder's big breakthrough role. But even all the side characters. Robert Goulet was in it. The talk show host from the 70s was in it. Glenn Shaddix. And although they are obnoxious, although they are even a little bit exaggerated, the actors took their time to make them real people. That film is so strong in the acting department. It's so well done. Then, of course, there's Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. And he is meant to be disgusting, off-putting, frightening, and he does that well. Obviously, he's not a real person. He's not supposed to even be a real person. Maybe at one time he was, since he's a ghost. But he's allowed. He's allowed to be over the top. And yet, he felt right. He felt like Michael Keaton, together with Tim Burton, the two of them obviously sat down and crafted a personality, and it stayed within certain boundaries, which it didn't in the second one. So a lot of stuff just didn't work in the second one. This is not a review of the second one. This is a review of the first one. Colorful, creative. The special effects were technically a little dated, but they're fun. There's stop motion animation thrown in because Tim Burton likes it. And it was a good way to make some of the creatures in this film come to life. The afterlife was very creatively imagined. There's a waiting room, there's offices, there's paperwork being passed around, there's skeletons sitting at typewriters. It's just, it's so much fun. And I can't go anywhere without mentioning Danny Elfman's music, because I am a Danny Elfman fan. He is my favorite film composer, and the Beetlejuice score is one of my favorites. The opening titles, well, it's my favorite piece of film music, the opening titles. A slow helicopter shot over this New England town where the film will take place would say to any other composer, let's give it moody, let's give it calm, placid. I'm making that up, but just some kind of long, slow piece of music. And Danny Elfman went, no, we need to generate the feeling of who this Beetlejuice guy is. And it opens with some of the most spectacular music I've ever heard in film. I love it. Absolutely love it. So anyway, it totally sparks. They have so much fun with it. They have so much fun with it. It just totally sparks my imagination. I just thrill to watching it. Never tired of watching it. And definitely recommend it. If you haven't seen Beetlejuice, if you're over 16 and you haven't seen Beetlejuice, we have a problem.